Edition of the Montpelier Planning Commission meeting to order. First, we have a couple of commissioners online, so if they wouldn't mind, please just speak up and let us know who you are.
Gabe Lajeunesse, Planning Commissioner.
Rowan Hawthorne, Planning Commissioner.
Great, thank you. Next agenda item is approval of the agenda. If anybody has any changes they want to make, let me know. Otherwise, I'd ask for unanimous consent to approve the agenda. Hearing nothing, the agenda is approved. Next is, oh. No, this is the agenda. This is the agenda.
Oh, yep.
So, okay. Now I'll give you a minute for that. Next agenda item is to consider the minutes of March 9th and March 16th. Take a couple minutes to take a look at it. Let me know if there's any proposed changes or edits.
Right.
Yeah.
There, I would change in comments from the commission on March 9th that Tim and I got reversed on that. So I had mentioned the sprinklers and Tim talked about and I believe it should say Act 250 exemptions.
So Sean mentioned the sprinklers. Tim urged people to review Act. It says 50, but I assume it's 250. Like that change as well. Any other proposed changes to either of the sets of minutes? Okay, seeing that we've got some changes on the table, I'm looking for a motion.
I could make a motion to accept both of the minutes for March 9th and March 16th, adopting the changes mentioned to switch Sean and Tim's name on the March 9th minutes.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. I just want to note there's still, I think, a typo. It refers to Act 50 versus Act 250.
Yeah, I've noted that.
All right. I'm assuming you're moving to make that change as well.
Yes, I am moving to make that change as well.
Thank you. And that has been seconded. All those in favor to adopt those minutes with those changes, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Those minutes are adopted or approved. Next is comments from the commission. Just to say again, this is our third week in a row together. So I just want to say thank you again for everybody for taking the time last week to have the special meeting. I think it was really helpful to have that discussion, and hopefully the comments that we came up with were reflected in the letter that got drafted and are being considered by the subcommittee. So again, just want to thank you for your time. I understand that everybody here has busy lives outside of here. So again, I appreciate the extra effort that everybody put in. The second thing that I will note is that I got a communication from the Housing Committee a couple of weeks ago. They are having a special meeting on Tuesday, April 7th at the Senior Center. It's generally geared as a listening session. They're trying to solicit ideas from developers in the community. I don't have the particulars on me right now, but there is both an in-person and a online option to attend. So if anybody is here is interested in attending that meeting, I'm happy to forward on the specifics of that meeting. I know that there's been some interest from folks here to be more involved in communicating and coordinating with the housing committee. So I think this is a good place where we can kind of get a better sense and a pulse of what the development community is looking for moving forward, and how we might, and we can think about ways of how we might integrate our practices into meshing that with what the housing committee is doing. So again, if anybody is interested, I pass those on. I'll pass the particulars on to you, but I don't have them on my person right now. And Mike and Meredith also are aware of the particulars, so you can contact them as well.
Yeah, if someone could forward it, I would definitely like to be involved there.
Tim, can we have you introduce yourself because you're a commissioner online?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Tim Sinnott, Planning Commissioner.
Thanks, Mike. Does anybody else have anything they want to comment on? Anyone online? Okay.
I'll just mention that there was an email that went around, and I can go and send this back out on Wednesday, the March 25th. That's 2 days from now, this Wednesday. CVRPC is doing an Essentials of Planning Municipal Training. So, and that's going to start at 6 o'clock. It's online. So if you're interested, if you'd like to get that, I can forward that to you. I can probably just forward it to the whole Planning Commission again. And then you'll all have it if you're interested in participating in that. So I just sent that back out.
Do you know if it's recorded? I would love to participate, but I had a conflict come up, and I would love to, go back and listen if possible.
They usually do. If you could possibly send Nikki Sabato would be able to let you know how to get and access that once it's been created, or if I assume they're going to create it because it's on Zoom, so it's pretty easy to create. And
Thank you.
Her email is in that what I forwarded you.
Okay, fantastic. I'll reach out. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Anybody else? Okay. Next agenda item is general business, comments from the public about something not on the agenda. We have someone here from the public in person. We have some folks online. So we can start with looks like Peter, looks like your hand's up.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, thanks.
Just a couple of quick things.
Very quickly, can you introduce yourself?
I'm
real
sorry,
quick?
Peter Kelman. I live in Mountain View Street in Montpelier. The first is I just want to say how much I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. It's very important, and I would encourage you. I attended the last meeting, and I was glad to hear you looking at the Country Club Road developer proposals. I think it's great that you're involved in that. And I would strongly encourage you to have somebody from the Planning Commission attend that Housing Committee special meeting and maybe talk about some kind of coordination. This is something that I've been hoping for a number of years, just because housing is so central to planning right now, and planning is so central to housing. The second thing is, I know you're going to be talking later about the sprinkler agreement, so if I can hang on till then, I make some comments. But let me just say this: housing has become such a challenging issue that many people are trying to figure out, how do we get more built? And one of the things we look at is, what are the obstacles? Now, is the sprinkler ordinance an obstacle to development? Absolutely. On the other hand, it's also, as the fire chief has said, it's probably the best way to protect people from a safety perspective. It'd be really great to figure out a way to figure out a good compromise. Montpelier's standards are stricter than the state's. They're stricter than almost any other community in the country. So let's ask ourselves why, and do we really need to be that strict, even though the fire chief tells us to? The third thing I want to mention is I see also you're going to be talking about a little bit about the districts. You're talking about the gasoline alley district. I just wonder whether you want to just, I'd like to ask, why have districts? Having districts sometimes, again, it can be an obstacle to development because then the people in those districts come out and say, oh, it's not in the character of our neighborhood or not in the character of our district. And I just think if you walk around Montpelier, you'll see that there are very few areas that have a real character that needs to be maintained, and that this is just an excuse for NIMBYism. So I just would encourage you to really question whether districts or neighborhoods should even be considered. And then finally, the appointment of a representative to CVRPC, the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, is going to be discussed at City Council. I would really urge you to, I think one of you should be that representative. I think that it's important to have Montpelier represented by people who are involved with planning, to be involved with the Central Vermont Planning Commission. But having the director of planning be the representative, I think creates a problem of an appearance of heavy-handed conflict. So I think you guys really need to consider having one of you volunteer to do that. I know you're already doing a ton of work, but this would be an important one. So that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter.
Steve Whitaker, Montpelier. So last week, the commission spent about an hour and a half or more evaluating 4 developer proposals for Country Club Road, debating housing mix, aesthetic appeal, neighborhood feel, commercial square footage, and parking ratios. Those would be legitimate planning considerations for a ready-to-build site. But Country Club Road is not a ready-to-build site. What the commission did last week is the equivalent of evaluating restaurant menus when the kitchen doesn't have a health permit. The food might sound wonderful, but until the kitchen passes inspection, nobody gets served. Tonight, I want to explain what the equivalent of a health permit actually requires and why this commission, not the developers, is responsible for ensuring it exists before anyone selects from a menu. To get a building permit for the first unit of housing at Country Club Road, the city needs a traffic study adequate for Act 250 review and local permitting. That's not optional, it's a legal prerequisite. Here's what most people in this process don't appear to understand, that the traffic study must model the full build out of the entire developable portion of the site, not just the 20 or 25 acres being offered to these 4 developers. The full developable footprint of Country Club Road is probably closer to 60 acres. Roughly 30 or 40 additional acres of buildable land exists beyond the current offer, where housing, civic buildings, etc., light industrial, etc., is feasible. State and local permitting authorities will require that the traffic study account for the trip generation of ultimate build out across all 60 developable acres, because the road that serves the first phase is the same road that serves every subsequent phase. That road is at present a single lane, effectively approaching a 14% grade with no alternate emergency access. It already produces documented vehicle incidents in winter driving conditions. The question of whether that road can be modified, supplemented, replaced, and at what costs and at what sequence relative to construction traffic is not a question for the 4 developers can answer in a proposal. It's a question that requires a master plan for the full 133 acres before a traffic study can be designed, and the traffic study before the first permit could be issued. You can't sequence this backwards. The master plan must come first. This commission has not produced one. And the developers will not produce one that includes the civic and resilience and commercial property that we need to design. The Country Club Road is a designated brownfield with unresolved contamination and the phase 2 environmental site assessment obligations that remain incomplete. This commission reviewed 4 developer proposals without asking about any of it. But the brownfield problem is not just the cost question. The cost of full remediation to residential standards is enormous and will consume a substantial portion of any pro forma, which means every affordability number that the commission discussed last week is provisional at best. The more immediate planning problem is this. The Country Club Road also contains prime ag soils, class 1 and class 2 soils that are uncontaminated and represent a long-term community asset. During brownfield remediation, excavation, soil hauling, grading, the risk of cross-contamination from disturbed, contaminated material migrating into those clean soils is very real. It requires an explicit contamination management plan as part of the remediation design. That plan must exist before any grading begins. It affects where you can build, in what sequence, and what buffers between contaminated and clean zones, which affects the site plan, which affects the traffic model, which affects the permit. None of this is separable. It's one planning problem, and all of it must be resolved before a developer is selected, not afterwards. What this commission is required to do under Vermont law requires a municipality plan address land use, transportation, utilities, and community facilities before development of this kind proceeds. Y'all have failed to do that, and you won't admit it, and you won't take a pause and say, halt this thing, we need to complete our plan. That obligation falls on this commission, not on the developers. The developers respond to an RFP. They can't be faulted for not solving problems the city never asked them to solve. But this commission can be faulted, and I'm faulting it tonight for reviewing their proposals as though those problems don't exist. This is 133 acres of public land purchased with public money. The opportunity here for affordable housing, for resilience infrastructure, for a genuine community asset is one Montpelier will not get again. It can't be realized. It can be realized, but only in the right sequence. Brownfield remediation first, master plan for the full site second, traffic study third, developer selection fourth. This is not a reason to go slowly for its own sake. It's the only path that actually gets housing built here without the city absorbing catastrophic cost overruns or watching a developer walk away mid-project from a contaminated site. And a process note, before approving tonight's minutes, the letter the commission produced for the CCR developer was not in the packet. The commission took no vote authorizing its submission. The March 16th transcript records the chair proposing to circulate a draft by email for Commissioner Redlines after adjournment, which is serial deliberation outside a public meeting, regardless of medium. That's the concern you raised about a Google Doc, that even email after a meeting without a vote is serial communication in violation of open meeting law. The commission should answer on the record, was this letter submitted under whose authority, and was it produced through a process that complied with Section 312 of Title I? Thanks.
Thanks, Steve.
And will you please address those issues?
Moving on. Next, we have our next agenda item is to designate commission members as liaisons to other city committees and to the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. I think I'll just kick this off by saying I've been heartened to see over the last few months that folks here are really starting to become more engaged and want to be more engaged. Have the commission be more engaged with other facets of city governance and the Regional Planning Commission. Just in my tenure here on the commission, we have tended to kind of act alone and sort of put out whatever work product we have into the ether and sort of let things sugar out where they may. But in the wake of us finalizing the city plan, which again was a heavy lift for all of us, and I think we should be proud of what we've done. This is a good opportunity to start to work more closely with other municipal and regional entities to sort of make sure that what's being envisioned in those subcommittees and at city council is consistent with the work that we have done, and hopefully give advice where we think is appropriate and warranted. So there's a handful of sort of what I'll call sort of top tier sort of agents, city subcommittees, and the Regional Planning Commission that if folks want to be a part of, I would certainly welcome that. The other thing I'd like to stress very quickly before we have this discussion is I understand that this is in no way suggesting that anybody needs to do this. Again, this is a significant time commitment for folks as is. I completely understand if folks do not have the time or ability to do anything more on top of that. I respect that certainly. So this is just, again, it's an opportunity for us to kind of expand our scope or kind of expand our visibility, as opposed to saying this is something that we need to do. So, so again, there's sort of a top tier list of sort of entities that I thought we might want to discuss first, and I'm hoping that folks have kind of looked through the relevant sort of landing pages to get a sense of what the commitment might be in terms of attending meetings and whatnot. I guess and then, sorry, I'll keep droning on for just another minute. The other thing that I'm envisioning here is, and I'm welcome to have a kind of a broader discussion about this, is this would be more, at least at the outset of this, probably with the exception of the Regional Planning Commission, would be us to, whoever the designee is, to sort of be attached to a subcommittee, would be more of it being there as being more of an observer at this point, and responding to inquiries from those committees, and then bringing those inquiries to the larger group for discussion if that's the case, and also to keep the planning commission sort of more generally apprised of what those other committees are doing, so we can just sort of better orient ourselves to what's going on outside of this room at any given time. So I guess the reason why I say this is I have seen in other contexts, not in this one, where a designee of a body that goes to another place to sort of embed themselves in it is suddenly making representations on behalf of the other body, and that can get sticky very quickly. So again, I think we can develop these roles, like as those roles develop and mature in terms of like the planning commission liaisons, we can talk about ways to sort of increase and be more a little proactive in those meetings. But I think just for now, I think it's probably safe to act generally as sort of just a communication conduit, and being sort of a communication contact for those other entities to communicate with the planning commission. And if there's any sort of representations that need to be made or any sort of input, that would be brought back to the commission for a broader discussion, and we can just feel like we've had that discussion, and we can feel more confident in terms of what we're communicating to those other entities, if that makes sense. Anything anybody wants to say before we dive into these committees? Okay. So I think at the top of my list is, as Peter Kelman was talking about, there right now, Mike is the sole Montpelier representative on the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. There are 2 spots on that commission for Montpelier. There's a primary and a secondary. I think for a number of reasons, having Mike be that primary sort of representative is not ideal. So Mike, I know you've been involved with the Regional Planning Commission for a long time. If you want to talk about what that role would entail, kind of commitment and sort of, and right now my understanding is there's some pretty interesting, meaty issues that are being worked out at the commission right now. So do want to talk about what's going on and what to expect going forward.
Yeah, I can certainly comment on that. And this is actually a committee for now. This is going to be on this topic of designating someone to be representing at the CVRPC is on Wednesday's council meeting as well. So, and at that meeting, I'm going to request to remain on for now, but we've got a second seat. It's not something I want to stay on forever. Adds a lot more. I've already have a lot of night meetings. This adds at least one a month. And as you get onto, they usually want, once you're on, to have you try to work on some of the committees because they have a lot of subcommittees, regional plan and project review and TAC and so they try to get you to participate in some of these other meetings. So usually you end up with more than one meeting a month, and that can be adding to a busy schedule can be difficult. But it's also a time with a lot that's going on, and it is also, I should point out, very common for planning directors to be in this role. Doesn't have to be, but when I was in Berry City, I was the rep from Berry City, and right now Berry City's rep is Janet Shatney, who replaced me. So, and in Waterbury, for many years, Steve Lotspeech was the representative, and he was the town planner for Waterbury. So it's pretty common. But when I came here initially, I was the alternate, and there were folks on the planning commission who would fill that seat, and that was the annual appointment we would go through and appoint. But at the time, when I got here, a lot of the planning commission were retired. Overwhelming majority of them, probably six of the seven were in their 70s. So they had a lot of free time. So for them, it was easier for them to be able to participate in both. We now have a much younger planning commission. So it's recognized that there's a few more challenges, but it certainly would be great to have an alternate, someone else to go and fill in. Act 181 has put a lot on the table, and there's a lot of conversations going on, and having somebody at the RPC who's deeply and intimately familiar with all of the projects is important. And I could fill that role as either the primary or the alternate. But certainly request to remain on at least for this year while the Regional Planning Commission finishes going through the Act 181 process. But that'll be up to the city council to make that determination. But it would certainly be great to have someone else from the planning commission if they have the time. They meet on the second Tuesday of the month. So if that helps you, knowing your own schedules, they usually meet 6:30 to 8 as the full board meeting. But as I said, there are also a number of committees that you may get on. Usually those start early evening, so they could be 4 to 6 or 5 to 7. They usually don't have a lot of really late meetings. But if you've got questions, you can certainly reach out or ask me, and I can help answer those questions. And if you've got suggestions, we can certainly bring that to council on Wednesday. There's somebody who wants me to bring that.
And just so I'm clear, the discussion at city council is just, are they just speaking sort of generally about what to do about, or do they have somebody in mind, or?
It came up, it was at the last council meeting. I didn't attend that last council meeting because this is usually a pro forma appointment. And some questions came up as to whether or not they wanted to start rotating or finding somebody else or appointing somebody from city council to be on or and so there's just a lot of questions. And unfortunately, Kelly being very new didn't have any of the answers for that. So it got kicked another meeting. So this meeting on Wednesday will be kind of a follow-up meeting, and I'll try to answer the questions that they have on that and see what direction they want to take. And as I said, we'll see if they want to put this out to a bigger process where they would open it up to the public. That's what they did. They asked it to be advertised at the last meeting.
Okay.
And Kelly put out an advertisement for all the other committees except the Regional Planning Commission and the
So I think that what this would be is if anybody's interested here, it sounds like we would basically, Mike would convey to the city council that we have somebody that, the planning commission that's interested in the position, and wherever that process leads, we can.
Historically, it has been
Right.
from the planning commission because we want to try to build connections because there's a lot of information you'll hear about, learn about, whether it's grants or other information you'll learn about at the RPC at their meetings, their monthly meetings, that you can bring back to everybody to consider.
Okay. So with that, is there any of the commissioners interested in that being part of the regional planning commission? Oh. Well, if anybody has any questions for Mike about that position and that opportunity, please let him know. So with that, we'll move on. So there are kind of three, I think, kind of top tier. Well, they're sort of the three sort of places where I think that intersect most with our work in city government, and that's city council, the housing committee, and the complete streets committee. And so I just wanted to sort of take those in turn, and I think I mean, I think it's pretty obvious what the city council is. Again, the housing committee has reached out to Maria and I and me to discuss. They have sort of rebooted recently, and they are becoming very active. So I think this is a good place to plug into that, given the primacy of housing and what we do. It makes this a very logical place for us to plug into. And next is the Complete Streets Subcommittee, which, Maria, can you speak? You have some personal knowledge of it, sort of. Yeah, and I don't know if you could just sort of speak to the scope of what they generally do. And
Like, unlike the planning commission, they are an advisory group. And so what they do is put together advice for city council on bike ped issues in Montpelier. So it's a bit different than our mission. But they seem like a good group of people. They've all been there for a long time now. And they put on events throughout the year promoting bicycle safety. And I think they just did a pedestrian safety too. But they're very active. It's a good group. I wouldn't want to go to the meetings, as I've told you. I think one person for my family.
That makes
is
sense.
enough.
yeah, I understand. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of put that out there. I just wanted to kind of put those three out at the same time. So if there's a discussion amongst the group, if anybody has a particular want in that group to plug into, we can talk about that. I know there's been a couple of people that have said they might be interested in the same committee. So I just wanted to have kind of a more open-ended discussion between those three. Don't be shy if you want to do it.
I have some interest in the in connecting with the housing committee.
Okay.
And I think they meet on Tuesdays as well, just as a heads up. I think they're
Okay.
first Tuesday. I think they're first Tuesday of the month.
That's what I remember.
Great.
I'd offered to do the council outreach.
Okay. And I just want to, what were you envisioning that entailing? I guess we haven't really
Yeah,
gotten down to brass tacks on that.
right. So I think some of that is about what the Country Club Road subcommittee is willing to accept, right? Certainly attending their meetings. There's at least 2 subcommittee meetings this week, if not more. And the subcommittee meetings seem to be fairly recently they've been brief, right? And online where they try to, because they often occur in the morning or midday, and folks trying to get in and get out,
Right.
and get to work. But it would, like you were saying, for liaison to mostly be coming back with information. Yeah, I think that the subcommittee probably isn't going to have a ton of occasions where they really want feedback from the planning commission in these meetings. So that's what I can see.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I think that's great. Glad that you have a specific vision for what that would entail. So, all right, so we have interest in housing, and we have some interest in city council, specifically the Country Club Road Subcommittee. Anybody else have any interest in either of those? How about Complete Streets? Apparently they're complete enough already.
My thought on complete
Yeah.
my thought on complete streets is that I would put it at I think it's good to have it in this consideration, but I would put it at a slightly lower tier than the other three that we've discussed, and that whoever volunteers for this, is every single meeting necessary for a planning commission representative liaison to be there? Perhaps not.
No, I appreciate that. And to be clear, I wasn't envisioning some sort of prescriptive requirement in terms of.
I'm trying to sell it.
Yeah, I know.
I'm trying to sell it a little
Yeah.
bit. So you might not have to go every time.
Yeah. More to keep.
The cadences, timeframe of Complete Streets meetings.
First Wednesday of every month from 5:30 to 6:45. Oh yeah, Maria knows this.
First Wednesdays.
In person and Zoom, right? Zoom.
And the transportation committee, does that still exist?
That's one of the questions that council is addressing right now, is the fact that there aren't enough members, and we've pushed for years to have a single transportation committee that would encompass complete streets and transportation. And right now it's dissolved down to a complete streets committee and one person who's left on transportation. So it looks like by default, we'll finally merge into one. Back in the day, there used to be 4 committees. Yeah. Yes, there was a parking committee, a bike committee, a pedestrian committee, and a transportation committee. And we had staff having to go to all of them, and we begged them to merge them. We got it down to 2, and we were like, all right, we'll take 2. And now it looks like we'll finally get down to a single committee. So we go.
So are you volunteering affirmatively?
Not available Wednesday night.
Oh,
There are some other committees I was eyeing, but I don't want to skip past this.
okay. No,
committee
that's
that we're
fine. It
talking
sounds
about
like
now.
we've sort of run out of runway with this discussion. So, Peter, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, yes. I think the Complete Streets Committee would be a good committee just to keep your eye on their agendas. And if there's something on the agenda where it's a very opinionated committee, they're very single-minded mostly about bicycles and secondarily about pedestrians. So they got very involved, for example, with the East State Street project and almost derailed it. So it might be worth occasionally noting when they're dealing with something that it would be a good idea for the planning commission actually to say something about it. at those those meetings. It is very, by the way, most of the committees are not like the planning commission. Planning commission and the DRB and the are regulatory committees. You guys have power. These other committees are all advisory. So their power is in how loud they can make their point, and they can make it pretty loud. So I would just keep an eye on it. You don't have to have a liaison and go to every meeting, but just check out their agendas once in a while. That's my opinion. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter.
Make a comment about that.
Sure.
Steve Whitaker again. Do I need to get up
Please
there?
come up, if you want Tammy to be able to
Hear
put
me.
down what you're saying.
So
then
let me just point to the overlap between complete streets. They are dealing typically with sidewalks, the safety of crosswalks, lighting, bike lanes, all the things that the planning commission aspires to, even if not specifically, but because the planning commission has the statutory opportunity, if not obligation, to prepare the capital budget and program, which the city has never had properly. And that is essential if we're gonna get out of the rut we're in, because the informal way we handle budgeting means we're not really qualified for most of the funds we're pursuing. And so complete streets could help and provide some extra horsepower to prioritizing and budgeting out those amenities, facilities.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, well, with that, we'll leave that open. If anybody has a hankering to get involved in that, let us know, but we'll leave that open for now. And there's a next set of committees that I sort of put out to the group. And I apologize, I didn't bring my computer today, so I can't remember all of that. It's energy, parks, I think, put out there. Any other ones? Conservation. I think that's what was put out for just kind of something to think about. But I know, Maria, you had sort of put out maybe historic preservation. So I'll just put it this way: there are a number of other committees in town, subcommittees, that I think do in some ways intersect with our work. And if anyone has any interest in those subcommittees, and I think consistent with like what I think Peter was mentioning, I would see this more as a keep tabs on them, see where there's opportunities, to kind of watch more closely when they're doing work that might impact anything that we're doing. But I don't see our liaisoning with them to be quite as heavy a lift as they are with, say, housing. So I know you were saying you were interested in some other committees, so.
Conservation Commission and the Montpelier Commission for Recovery and Resilience.
That's a good one. Thanks.
So
That last one doesn't exist. They just reformed as a different organization.
Maple?
No,
No.
they're now a foundation. They teamed up with the Montpelier Foundation.
Montpelier Foundation, yep.
Okay, then the Conservation Commission.
And it's
over
it's
there.
not like it's not a city.
It's not a city
entity.
commission.
Yeah.
It is now. Oh, where did they had it? No, it's something foundation. Give me just a minute.
It's like an S Corp or something.
No. Foundation for a Resilient Montpelier. So the Montpelier Commission for Recovery and Resilience merged with the Montpelier Foundation. So it's a new entity between those two.
But not a city entity.
It's not a city committee.
Okay.
It's separate.
It's like all right.
That doesn't mean that
You can still
could-
go.
yeah.
Still love
Yeah.
to hear what's going on. I mean, seriously, if it is something that interests you, you know, the extent that you're interested in keeping tabs on that, that would be informative for us, I'm sure. So,
Just as a note, so I staff the Historic Preservation Commission for Montpelier, and one of their members is on this foundation, and it does provide a sort of cross-pollination. And just, keeping tabs on each other and being able to coordinate. But they seem to be a little bit more project specific versus, projects that relate to planning, but definitely project specific.
right. How many members are on there?
And the foundation?
Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean
know what
this.
I have
I'm
the
running.
website.
Sorry, I
I
apologize.
I just don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have board members and then they have staff.
Yeah.
Um,
I was thinking of board member, but no worries. It's not.
yeah, it does.
It's not relevant.
It's more than it does.
Okay.
There.
I would be interested in keeping tabs on the energy committee. I can't commit to anything super regular, but I'm very interested in energy and the intersection between housing and energy and transportation and planning. So I'd be happy to keep tabs on that and report back if there's something worthwhile to attend and can attend if we think it's necessary.
That'd be great.
It's going to volunteer for parks.
Well, look at this. It's just.
Just complete street.
Yeah.
Complete streets.
I'm kind of realizing that the Conservation Commission also meets on Wednesdays, which are not great, but if it's just a matter of tracking agenda items and not attending, yeah, I can circle back
If it doesn't work,
this is not a good
that's
fit.
fine. That's fine.
We can reach out to them, right? Are we allowed to email them and just let them know that we are now the liaison for?
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, now that we kind of have a sense of where people might want to plug into, and we can. Let me think about it. I think it might be a good idea if we kind of come up with a kind of a boilerplate communication that just sort of says like, hey, I'm so-and-so from the Montpelier Planning Commission. We've been thinking about ways that better sort of interact with, and I'd like to, introduce myself. I'd like to be able to do this. We'll figure it out, but
Right.
I hadn't thought that far ahead. Sorry.
I don't know. I think it's good. Just for them to have like a face, a liaison.
Yeah.
Is kind of like.
No, I think but I just I think it'd be a good idea if we're consistent about how we do that outreach. Not that I want to hold anybody back, but you're more thoughtful about this than I was. So
It's fine.
that's good. Okay. All right. So if I have this correct, let me know if everybody agrees with this. I have Tim down for housing, Sean for city council, specifically the Country Club Road Subcommittee, Leah in conservation, Rowan energy, Maria parks. That everybody great.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Excellent. And thanks again, everybody, for stepping up and being willing to do this. Again, I want to be I'm very cognizant of people's time commitments. So again, it's really great to see that people are willing to do this. Can't say that enough. Anything else we want to discuss on this agenda item before we move on?
To be clear, we're not going to reach out until we have some type of boilerplate language. So.
It's up to this group, but that's what I would recommend. Like, I think it might be good to just sort of come up with just some very sort of pithy introductory email or something like that, a script, if that makes sense. And then I guess I would just say in the meantime, like, figure out who the relevant contacts are. So when we do come up with that script, we could just fire it off and move forward. Is anybody interested in developing such a script or boilerplate language?
I can do that.
Awesome.
You see like a paragraph.
Yeah, I just think I think it's just good to have consistency across how we approach this stuff. But again, if people feel fine just reaching out unilaterally and doing whatever they want, that's fine. That's just my thought. So
There's no rush, I think. So I think it makes sense to come up with something and then look at it at our next meeting.
yeah. So you're willing to do that, Maria?
Yes.
Excellent.
Paragraph.
Yeah, thanks. Excellent.
All right, so we'll look for that for next week and next time's agenda, 2 weeks. It's available.
Great. Okay, then. Oh,
Sorry, isn't that 3 weeks?
Or
We
3
have an
weeks.
extra Monday in
Okay,
March.
okay, in 3 weeks.
Next agenda item is the public hearing on the amendments to the river hazard area bylaws. The agenda contains a link, that's online contains a link that shows a red line version of the proposed amendments. So those that are in front of a computer can access it that way. I guess I'll hand it over to you, Mike.
Yes, as soon as you say you open the public hearing.
I'm opening the public hearing.
All right, well, thank you. All right, so I don't know how detailed, I mean, we could put the draft up, share it on screen, but I'm just gonna go through a quick summary because this is not like a big zoning update. This is a relatively small cleanup. The city made interim amendments to the river hazard regulations on April 17th, 2024 to close some loopholes that allowed non-conforming commercial space to be converted into non-conforming residential space without elevating the lowest floor. And interim amendments can be adopted with a smaller, quicker process, and they're only good for 2 years. And so we are coming to the end of our second year. And so we're going to need to go through and do a full adoption to make those permanent. And so that includes at least one public hearing from the planning commission. And then at least one public hearing from city council, but it actually will be 2 public hearings at city council just because we always do 2 public hearings. Even though statute strangely is slightly different and says you only need 1. So the proposed amendments, the real short summary, there are about 5 changes. One is the permanent adoption to the changes that were made to section 623 that closed the first floor conversion loophole. So we were working very hard to elevate and get residential properties out of the floodplain. And at the same time, we had some commercial landlords that said, I can't get commercial tenants. I'm just going to convert my commercial space to residential space. And this included properties, potentially, there were properties that had 6 feet of water in 2023. And so we went to council and said, if you want to convert non-conforming commercial space to residential space, if you had to build it new, it had to be elevated, and there are all these things, except if you had non-conforming space. There was actually a loophole that said you could put people back into those non-conforming spaces regardless of the risk. And so we asked for that amendment and to close that loophole, and the council agreed. So that was one of the places, but we can still, those spaces still could be converted to be used for hotels, motels, shelters. That's all okay because it's not permanent space in those areas. Second was an amendment to chapter 630 and the definitions in section 1001 to clarify the distinction between substantial damage and substantial improvement. The distinction between the 2 terms has regulatory and financial implications for the city and property owners. And the clarity is important to be consistent in the administration of regulations, and ours was not perfectly clear. And so we went through, Meredith and I talked to kind of really clarify this to make sure, and this relates to number 3, which was the section on historic preservation exemption. We had kind of mashed these 2 together and they weren't working well, so we kind of split them apart. So we made an amendment to 630 and an amendment adding a new 721 section on historic preservation exemption from substantial improvement determination. And so we moved the prior language from 634, which we just talked about in number 2, and then clarified those. Number 4, we revised some terms that were used, statutory references, and other specifics for consistency with changes to federal and Vermont law. So Act, the Home Act and a number of other state law changes have kind of impacted not only zoning, but flood hazard, river hazard regulations. So we had to go through and make some of these changes to be consistent with state law. And some of these are just, we've been using this for a number of years, so we kind of had to go through and fix a few little tweaky things on how we, clarifications on the H&H studies, which is hydraulics and hydrodynamic studies, when they're required in 803. State references to state definitions for farming and farm structures and interested persons and those types of things kind of changed over state law. So, and then number 5 was additional minor changes for internal consistency and clarifications, including references to the Unified Development Regulations, Montpelier City Plan, and other cross references. So I think the document referred to the Montpelier zoning regulations, which of course we don't have zoning regulations. We have Unified Development Regulations. They talked about, we now call, it was the Montpelier Master Plan. It is now the Montpelier City Plan. So just making some of those minor changes. So those are the 5 sets of changes, and we could certainly go through each one. But for the most part, these are pretty much, the regulations will be the same as they are today. We will also go through and we've cleaned up the map. So it's the same map, but it's going to be a slightly different looking, just because it's going to be putting in refreshing some of the background data, like the parcel lines and those types of pieces. But the actual lines, the regulatory lines haven't changed. And I guess I'll turn it back for any questions or comments. Or public input. Oh, Peter has a question.
His hand is still up, but maybe that's a.
Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay.
I have considerable experience with the flood hazard regulations because I own 3 properties in Barry, one of which is on the edge of one of which is in a flood zone and was slightly flooded. And so I have a couple of questions based on my experience. Mike, I'm guessing that, like in Barry, where you did this in Barry, a lot of this language is actually required by the state, by FEMA. I mean, in other words, there's, for example, the substantial damage and substantial improvement issues are ones that FEMA wants enforced, and the state Department of Environment, I can't even remember which it is, wants it enforced. Is that right, Mike, that a lot of this language comes because of needing to be in tune with those?
Yeah, the state and federal government have a lot of rules, but they don't always provide enough detail. So once you get into it, or there's a variety of ways of meeting that same requirement. So you could meet the requirement by having public hearings, or you could meet the requirements by having administrative rules. So our rules just had some subtle differences in how we manage the historic preservation. And we can be stricter, which we are stricter in a lot of ways. We are a CRS community rating system. So we enforce our regulations at a higher standard in order to give relief on rates. We are currently class 8, so everybody in town who purchases flood insurance gets a 10% discount. We were ready to go to a 7, but unfortunately, FEMA is kind of holding up, moving us to a 7 where people get an extra 5%. But so we do have some rules that are stricter. We also have a lot of rules that help clarify and answer those questions of how how to administer those rules that they want, such as substantial improvement and substantial damage. But yes, there's a lot of this that is prescribed under federal law.
So, I guess just to follow up on that, what I ran into in Barry is that the enforcement of these rules, the Barry planning people were constantly going back to the state and trying to get their okay for it. Is that the process that goes on, or is the planning department in Montpelier its own boss on some of these issues?
Yeah, if you want to go and comment on it.
So because I'm the one who's actually issuing the floodplain permits at this point, so this is Meredith, Crandall. So there are specific types of projects that we are statutorily, and it's also called out in our regulations, required to run those by the state. So, new builds, or substantial improvements, those applications must get either an okay by the state, or the application has to go to the state and we have to give them, I think it's 30 days to comment. And it's only if that 30-day lapses that we can then issue the permit, without comments. But other projects, smaller projects, we don't have to run those by the state, because the state has basically looked at the regulations and confirmed that the regulations cover those smaller projects. If it's a project where I am not quite sure what to do, we can definitely go to them for guidance. But those aren't items that it's statutorily required that we go through them. There's also anything that involves, stream alteration. We have to consult with the state. So, we're not, in some ways, yes, we're our own boss, but we have very specific things that have to be in the regulations that we have to do to meet the CRS requirements and not get booted out of that program. And the feds set a floor, and then the state set a little higher floor, and then we go from there. So for these particular changes, what I would throw out there is that this new section 721, and I can share it if anybody wants me to, doesn't change what we've been doing per guidance that we got from the state on how to interpret the distinction between substantial damage and substantial improvement, and how that interacts with historic structures following the flood in 2023. Like, this is how we've been applying what the reg said before, but this is going to make it, I hope, clearer for future people applying these regulations, as well as people trying to understand them in the get-go. Whether it's somebody in our office or somebody outside, or when we're talking to somebody new at the state or somebody at FEMA who's trying to ask us how we implement our regulations.
So Meredith, I've just a quick follow-up on that. For substantial improvement. So now we know that there were some buildings in downtown that were commercial and are being converted into apartments, like on Langdon Street. No?
Just go ahead, finish your question.
Well, I guess what I mean, are these changes going to affect properties that already had started to be in the loophole? If the loophole is going to be closed, will it affect those properties?
Peter, the loophole's been closed for 2 years because we adopted interim regulations that closed the loophole. I think there were 2 projects that happened during the loophole period. And those had to be allowed to happen because we issued the permits in compliance with the regulations that were in effect at the time. The interim changes closing the loophole happened a little less than 2 years ago. And those weren't this new section 721, but those closed. We haven't had any other permits issued for conversion to residential on the first floor in the regulated flood elevation, right? So that's that. No more of those has happened. Everything on Langdon Street is above the first floor. Those are all fine. We can't go back and make things that permits that have already issued be violations.
Okay, but here's my question about that. Because again, I ran into this. So let's just say then that one of them wants to make some additional change, any improvement in the building. Does a further improvement in a building that is in the flood zone mean that now they've got to file a flood hazard, permit in which you will go back and say, well, how much money have you put now? Now is the substantial improvement issue. How much money did you spend over the last 3 years? And now you're proposing to do more. Well, that's going to be a violation.
So Peter, that goes to what you consider in your calculation for what is a substantial improvement.
Right.
And Montpelier has calculated that differently since before I got hired about 8 years ago. Montpelier looks at open permits. So if you're doing a project and you're in the midst of that project and your permit is open, you haven't finished your first floor conversion that you got a permit for, and then you start adding, I'm now converting my second and third floor on top of it, and the whole permit is open, the prior permit is open, that's when we look at, you've now changed your scope, now you have to elevate, because it's all considered within the substantial improvement calculation. We don't look back 3, 4, 5 years like they do in some communities. That may be what you were rolling into. And we don't have to look back throughout history on every improvement to a structure. Montpelier's is defined to look at just open permits, open river hazard permits. That's what we look at. So I think that addresses your concern.
That is very good. What you just said. It would have saved me a lot of headaches and heartaches in Barry. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I guess the only other point I would make is, so we are given a lot of bit of difference from the state on these reviews, because we also, I'm a certified floodplain manager, and so usually I'm, kind of on the same level as the folks that are at the state. And previous, Audra is a certified floodplain manager as well. So right now, Meredith and Nick are both working on that same certification, so that way they've got that extra level of study and training in order to get certified, to be able to administer the rules better. And most places will not have that. So it's just something we work towards to try to make sure that these things are complicated, and we want to make sure we get it right and make sure we're following all the rules.
Okay. Is there any more public comment or questions? Hearing none. Guess I closed.
You closed
I
the public
closed the
hearing,
public hearing.
and now we would have an opportunity, if the commission wants to forward this to city council for consideration.
So somebody should move to, and I will do that. I will move that we forward this draft of river hazard area regulations to city council for their approval.
Second that.
Great. We've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of forwarding this to city council for their considerations, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, please say nay. Okay. Thank you. Is there anything else you need from us, Mike, on this? Okay.
We should be good on that item.
Great.
Thank you.
Next agenda item is to discuss amendments to the Unified Development Regulations, and I'm sorry, I have to admit, I'm not quite sure what this agenda item is. I don't remember specifically. Oh,
That's your chart. Did you print one up?
yes, I did.
So we had
Okay.
two items that were kind of moving forward for the discuss amendments to Unified Development Regulations. One was, we still kind of had that open discussion, and Sean or Tim sent one that Unified, I think, is both integrated to put together a guiding principles, because that was what we were talking about at the last meeting. And we also have the staff put together just some questions to start with. We're going to have to start developing, Meredith and I are going to have to start developing a red line. And so before we just start throwing paint at the wall, we wanted to kind of start throwing some of the ideas, things we heard, things we have heard, and just start talking about what types of changes we might want to be considering. And so I thought, in talking with Meredith, that probably one of the best places to start would be to start talk about the zoning map itself, part 2. We had a lot of discussions, and that's going to kind of reach out into these other places to start saying, if we're going to talk about removing the architectural standards, then we have to talk about the design review. So while we're kind of just talking about part 2, it's going to kind of reach out and touch a whole bunch of other places. So Meredith did kind of most of the work, all the work on kind of putting everything together that kind of lays out a couple of options that if you said, yes, let's put that into a red line, we can always go back and take it out. We can always do changes afterwards. But these were some of the things that are kind of in the Excel spreadsheet that we thought about, that we had heard, just running down through a couple of them: merging residential 1,500 and 3,000, merging residential 6,000 and 9,000, eliminating the municipal district by merging those parcels into adjacent districts. We shouldn't have a municipal district. It doesn't make sense. Some of the urban center district options that we heard: convert urban center 2, beginning Berry Street and Stonecutter Way, into urban center 1, or merging urban center 2 and urban center 3 into a single district. So rather than having 3 urban centers, we would just have 2. Some riverfront district changes were suggested here, including maybe carving out and creating a new, yes, we want to remove districts, but kind of carving out Gasoline Alley into its own district. It's kind of a funky district. So, kind of Dunkin' Donuts and Cumberland Farms and all those are the same district as Berry Street. And that just doesn't seem to make sense. That kind of seems like that would be its own district, rather than having these weird carve outs to go and say, you can do it in that part of River Street, but not this part of River Street. Some options include changing Berry Street section to MUR or merge with UC2. So, we could mix use residential. We have a riverfront district. It kind of was a carryover. The zoning that existed through the 90s and 2000s, Berry Street extending out was all riverfront. That was the district. And when we created the new zoning, that kind of stuck and it stayed. But now we also have very similar districts on Northfield Street and Elm Street. Maybe up by the college mixed use. College is mixed use residential. So we've got these other areas which are mixed use, just like Berry Street, and maybe it just makes sense to make them all the same. They have the same residential density, so we could just merge those. And again, these are just a list of ideas that we could go through from top to bottom and kind of get some ideas. But that helps us, Meredith and I, to be able to start to go through and say, okay, now that you've made some preliminary decisions about, let's get rid of the architectural standards because we're getting rid of that part of the
Major site
major site plan, that would get us to use just the design review district. And so we could eliminate that whole section out of there, and we could go through and make these changes. Then you guys can take a look at them. And like I said, we can always go and say, I don't like that. Let's go back. But it gives us something. There's no sense having us make those changes and then have the board say, no, I'd rather have you guys say, let's try that and see how it works. And we can go through, see how it kind of works out at the end and then come back. So that's what mostly you see in here. Some of these are things that maybe we wouldn't as staff agree with, and we make notes of that. Like raising the downtown height limit. For the most part, we have very, very, very few buildings that are built to the current height limit. So even if, yes, we have to elevate buildings because of floodplains, we have a lot of requirements. The truth is, we have a 60-foot height limit, and most of the buildings down here are 45 feet, 40 feet. There's a lot of room to add additional stories above it. But certainly we could go through and have that conversation, and you guys are the policymakers. We're just here to be your scribes, make recommendations, suggestions, other ways that we could go through and meet your goals and objectives. So this is what we started with for the first short list. So my thought process wise, if we could have some decisions, we could start working on a red line. And then when that red line is ready, so maybe next meeting, we're talking about part 3 and some of the changes there, but we can go through and make the changes to part 2. Then we could meet with you guys on part 2. And while we're talking with you on part 2, that might take 2 or 3 meetings. We're working on part 3 to get those ready. So that way we're in the background putting together a bunch more red lines where we can keep bringing them forward, because it's hard for us. We've got a lot of other things going on, a lot of other commitments. So we can't just always be saying we're going to have all these red lines available for the next meeting and kind of keep going back and forth. If we could get a set of decisions, we can get you something. You can be working on those while we work on the red lines. And hopefully my goal, my hope would be that this is something that's not going to take a year or years to get through. I would really like to see us be able to get through this in months. And that would be my hope, because the sooner we get these done, the sooner they go into effect and we can start seeing how they go, because we may put them into effect and then come back to you and say, oh, this didn't work. And I think we were talking about some big changes. So I think, big impact changes. So I think that would be nice to see some of these get into effect sooner so we can start to feel them out, see if it has the impact that we want. That could be a positive big impact, and hopefully we don't have too many negative big impacts.
If somebody needs to have anything like maps pulled up, stuff like that, just holler, do that. Yeah, I know that would be helpful for me. I'm kind of in the background pulling up maps and I'm gonna do our Access GIS map. That's the public one, because that has fewer layers, and so hopefully would be easier to discuss. So what do you want to look at first?
Do we think of downtown first?
Sure.
Or do you want to work outward in?
I think tackling urban first is fine.
You see one.
Go urban and then res.
Yeah.
So this dark purple is the UC3. This kind of gray purple down here, I'll have to zoom out a little, is the UC2. And then the pink, pale pink is UC1.
So the primary difference between Urban Center 1 and the others is just that Urban Center 1 has block style construction. So that means you basically have zero lot setbacks. Whereas Urban Center 2 and 3 have some setbacks.
Mhm.
So there's some green space that's required as a part of each one of those properties. So as you get up past the library, you have large stately buildings with some lawn in front, or on Berry Street, you have very small pieces of grass in front, but there is some areas in there. And that's really the difference why those were cut out as separate, was that they're 2 and 3 don't have block style construction allowed.
So, and as you've discussed throughout this review process, these zoning districts and the dimensional standards in them were set to reflect what was there and to try and make sure that at least anybody trying to build to look the same was going to be able to do that without having to get a variance or a waiver just to look like everybody else in their area. So it's up, if you guys want to say, no, we don't need this to stay the same, that's fine. But that's why those were carved out differently.
Meredith, could you zoom out a tiny bit? I was hoping
I-
to see that southern section, see how far down it goes on Berry Street.
Yeah, it stops here. So here's Hubbard Street. Here's
Goes up to
Nelson.
Nelson.
Great.
It goes just past Nelson on the riverside, but to Nelson on the upstream uphill side.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, if I zoom out too far, then suddenly you lose the ability to read the.
No, completely. I appreciate what
Come
you just showed here.
One thing I will note about Urban One is that it is the most permissive, right, in using your lot. But it still includes single family homes. It still includes buildings that have setbacks and lawn. Extending Urban One into the other urban areas doesn't, those will all still, everything that's already there should still be, nothing's
It's allowed still.
allowed.
Yeah,
right?
it's allowed. It's not like they will have to change.
Yeah.
But they can change.
And somebody could come into Urban One and if you extend it onto Berry Street area, for instance, and build something with a setback, even if they are allowed technically to build to the sidewalk.
They could build to the property line.
To the property line on either side.
Mhm.
Because I would love to see some consolidation, urban, which one is the dark purple, urban 2 or 3? Has like 25 lots in it.
Yeah, that's Urban Center 3.
Yeah.
I
Urban
always
3
get the 2 mixed up.
has 25 or so lots plus or minus, and to have an entire zone dedicated to 25 lots seems not ideal.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would vote for consolidation here. There's a possibility that 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, the character of North Main Street could shift. Nothing is going to happen very, very rapidly here. And what if we imagine what that looks like in 50 years, where there is higher density in on that North Main Street section there, and you could be also surrounded by some of the older Victorian homes. And I think that's sort of a beautiful vision for the future. I can imagine there being some pushback in wanting to, maintain only these Victorian buildings in this section. But I think that I'm a huge proponent of yeah, increasing density and pushing forward with a new vision.
Meredith, I think it's the camera
It's the
itself that's
projector.
off. It's not them, it's the camera itself that's off.
It's just a projector.
Wait,
It's the projection.
Yep, but there's a way to adjust it with the remote, and I don't know how
Gabe's goes.
to get it shifted so it's lined up. Yeah, Gabe has his hand up.
Gabe, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just step back for 1 second here? And I mean, this is fine if this is how we want to go through it. You know, what we heard from Mike and Meredith at the beginning is a request for some guidance so they can start working on things and have some freedom to do that. And I think, you know, that we want to identify policy, right? We want to say, look, this is what the planning commission would like moving forward, work on those things. And you could do it a couple ways. We could either work on that draft that was put together. There was, you know, a document that was floated. We talked about it in our previous meetings, like these are the priorities. It's all framed under the strategic guidance. Or we could go through the list of questions that Mike just had. But what I'm concerned is that if we dive into this, that then the planning department will go back and maybe make their own decisions. I mean, the height limits downtown, I mean, they're already, Mike, I love you, brother, but there was already a thumb on the scale in your comment, right? Like, oh, we'll listen to policymakers, but we don't need to raise the heights. You know, the project at the Burlington Mall that SD Ireland and partners undertook never would have happened if there were height limits, right? I don't know what can happen in the future, but I do know that the federal building and the lot behind it represents the biggest opportunity for redevelopment that Montpelier has seen in decades. And so I don't know what could come in, and maybe nobody, but what would be amazing is if the state pressed the federal government to sell that for $1 and it was auctioned for $1 to the city or given to the city for $1, and we went through a similar RFP process, and who knows what DW or other developers might come back with. I don't think we want to limit them. So I think we should step back and, you know, I'll do this if you guys want to do this, but I feel like we'd be better off giving very clear direction as a planning commission about what it is we want the planning department to do.
Can I just say one thing, Meredith, before you jump in? I agree, Gabe, but I do think that this is helpful because once we have kind of reshaped the map, then we can start diving into height limits, FAR, and setbacks, and thinking about those specifics.
Yeah, and I don't actually want to dive into that. I just want to agree on our strategic framework
Okay, so you want to go back to the
I want to be very clear. Are these the things that we want or not? But again, if you want to just do this, that's fine.
And I guess I just want to be clear, Gabe, when you say these are the things, what are the things that you want to talk about?
I believe there were five policy guidelines that we all had agreed on, but we never sort of voted on and said, this is the guidance we want the planning department to follow.
He wants to go back to the guiding principles.
Okay, thanks. That's what I was trying to figure out.
Can I make one comment, Aaron?
Please.
Before you
Go ahead.
So Gabe, as the person who drafted this spreadsheet, my understanding was that the planning commission had actually already decided on those 5 principles as at least the initial principles. So every single thing in this spreadsheet goes to those principles. There is not, I don't think there's a single thing on here that wasn't one of those 5 principles that you brought up. I was focusing very heavily on those to work in tandem with you so that as you're, you know, so that you don't have to make decisions on any of these. We're trying to throw out for you what specific kind of changes we might make that have been discussed over these last several months tie into the principles that I understood you had decided on, or at least highlighted as some of the top 5 principles you were considering.
So Meredith, that's great.
I don't care
but
which
we never,
order
but
you
we
go
never
in.
did. But we never
Okay,
did.
that's great. That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I don't care if you go back to them. I'm just letting you know that we were actually trying to respond to those principles. That's all.
Am I mistaken? Did we adopt those as our guiding principles? I mean, I know we all were in agreement and we were talking about drafting something, and I'm grateful the planning department took those into consideration.
No, we didn't, and I had just put together a draft based off of what we discussed 2 meetings ago before the special meeting, and then integrated a couple of thoughts from Sean. But no, they'll still just sort of sit out there currently. Yeah.
Would people be okay if we just brought that document forward and we adopted it? I mean, I don't know if everybody could. Do we have Mike, do you have a copy of it?
It was emailed earlier today. Was it just emailed to me or?
Someone can forward it to me because I don't have an email copy. I can share it on the screen. I don't have, all I have is a printed copy that was.
I can send it to you, Meredith.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. When I saw that this morning, or this afternoon, I didn't realize it hadn't been going to everybody. Oh, no, it went to everybody. So Gabe, you should have it. It came in about 4:34 this afternoon.
Yeah, no, I have it.
I think the only one that doesn't have it is Meredith.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a printed out copy. That's fine. But if you guys wanted me to share it on the screen for like a
Yeah.
live thing or something, then
I'll do
that's
that right
fine.
now.
Is this
To make
Yeah.
make sure that is there something we need to do to make sure we're in full compliance of public meeting law, right?
No,
Do we
we're
need to
fine.
show it on the screen and then, okay.
You don't have to show it on the screen for public meeting law because everybody has it, but I think it works. That way everybody,
So I move that we adopt Tim's draft as our guidance to the planning commission.
Well, I did add to it, and I don't know if people had a chance to review a couple of notes that I put in there based off of Sean's feedback. I think it's important to at least review those, and we can say yay or nay to those additions.
Can you highlight those additions?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to do a couple of things at once. Can someone else forward that document to Meredith?
Oh,
I don't have it yet.
Oh,
Or you
okay.
can share it on your screen.
Oh,
You-
I've got it right here.
Okay.
That's why I stopped.
Okay.
I thought he
Yep,
had.
hold on, let me stop share. And then you can share. You should be able to.
Oh,
It would be nice for members of the public to be able to see it.
Yeah, get it up. So I had emailed Tim just a couple thoughts to try and synthesize some things that Marie and Tim had said during our previous discussion. Where Maria was saying, "Oh, we should be considering like what is the purpose of specific regulations," and Tim had
I'm gonna-
thrown out
I'm
an
gonna forward it
idea
to you so you can
of,
run it from yours. So it's
you know, making criteria, very permissive. I think he basically said,
I said zoning in Montpelier should be explicitly permissive of housing development over prescriptive.
yeah,
From the language in Tim's, I don't know if you or Tim did this. But I would make the case of Euclid confirming that zoning is a legitimate use of local government. My thought was to make that even more specific and saying that each zoning regulation and its underlying element should have a basis in promoting public health, safety, and welfare. So it's like, as you look at each part of the zoning code, can you like make a straight line to how that regulation supports public health, safety, and welfare? But then of course there's a whole historic preservation chapter, which is has a different interest.
well,
And I don't know how
we're
to.
you can drive the general welfare bus right through the.
But there's a different, you're balancing different interests in those cases, but I don't know, like, how do we review the historic preservation regulations?
So it's
You know,
design review. Just
Design review. But
I
how,
think
but,
that's
like,
tied into certain funding links. Mike left, but I think that ties into the designated downtown and having a designated
exactly.
downtown, which then lets you tap into other funding aspects and be able to promote your designated downtown. It goes into like Montpelier Alive. I think I can't remember all the nitty gritties right now. Mike is
Right, it is
working with those
required by
aspects.
statute.
So it's not a straight line,
Right. No, it's
but they're connected.
but there's also the historic structures, like demolition rules for historic structures. There are other rules that don't necessarily have to do with public health, safety, and well, kind of.
Yes. Again, it's not a straight line. So we also having a historic preservation commission and having it ties into the design review standards as well as having protections and stronger review that meets up with federal standards, national preservation standards that goes into that demolition
Right.
provision, ties into the city being a certified local government, which allows it to get funding for other projects tied to historic properties. And so that's where we're looking at potentially
Right.
applying for some grant money in the next couple of years that would be used potentially for helping to do studies or other mitigation projects for flooded buildings downtown to then help them stay there, right? So
Right.
that goes towards the public welfare in some ways. Again, it's not a straight line drawing this, but that's if you're talking about historic preservation design review, they tie into funding opportunities that we wouldn't have otherwise that lead ultimately back to public welfare or health. So it's there. That's why it's
Yeah.
I know it feels more attenuated, and there's some aspects that get brought in because of that. I mean, Mike, I don't know if I can't like reel it off the design review link to the designated downtown to funding. I think it was the designated downtown and design review where we have to have some aspect of design review or
Yeah. To be a designated downtown, you have to have design review.
and designated downtown, having a designated downtown gives us access to what that goes to public health, welfare, and I'm sorry, what was the third item? And safety.
Yeah, and generally it just falls under the public welfare because it's improving the economic climate of everybody. It's pretty much going and putting yourself in a position where we're all going to work together towards a common downtown aesthetic, and that helps the economic growth. So that's where the design review comes in.
Yeah, but isn't there certain funding we would not be able to apply for or
Well, designated downtown gives you a whole set of funding.
right? But this is where the conversation was going while you had to
Oh.
step out. Sorry.
Yeah.
So Maria wanted all the parts of the zoning regulations to tie preferably straight line to the public health, safety, or welfare, and was calling out design review and historic preservation aspects as not tying to those. And I was trying to make the argument that they do, it's just not a straight line. It loops around.
Yeah, I mean,
Funding
it's
opportunities.
probably more appropriate to look at it as just making sure we have a clear purpose statement for each one of the provisions to make sure that it's clear understanding why, what is the public governmental ask that's going into that. Because Euclid versus Ambler is a very specific case. Yes, it is use of police power. It's the constitutional right to use the zoning fits under the U.S. Constitution from 1926 to go through and say that you can use zoning as a regulatory tool. And really, in that case, it was just breaking up the community into districts in general sense. So you'd have, and it of course had major negative consequences over 100 years of use because it was very rigidly used to create residential districts, commercial districts, industrial districts, because at the time anybody could do anything. So you'd have a residential district and then somebody might come in next door and put a slaughterhouse or a brick making factory or a tannery with all of the chemicals and everything right adjacent to residential neighborhoods. And what the village of Euclid did was to try to go through and say, yeah, we're going to have areas that are set aside for those industrial uses because it's not appropriate to have a slaughterhouse in the middle of a residential neighborhood, which is what they were dealing with. And there was no way for the communities to be able to go and say, you just can't do that there. That's not, it's impact safe, health, safety, welfare. And so that was the case that kind of opened it up. But now, once you're past that layer that says that communities can do zoning, it's really more about also a public purpose more than just health, safety, and welfare. So what's the public good, the public the public purpose that we're trying to advance by using these regulations? And so the protection of the historic character of our downtown, or the protection of the historic buildings. We have design review. We don't have the historic district. We have a design review district. So they're two different ones under state law. So we actually are just a design review district, but we take the historic protection into that context. But we aren't explicitly historic preservation district. And that's a policy choice that we've made to go in that direction.
So I think my point was that we would need a separate goalposts for the design review, because it's not always just about health and safety, because it is about this architectural integrity. So like for you guys, you can obviously make the design review district so impossible to ever have anything built. You can over-regulate it, right? So, and preserve it in like resin. Or you can go the other spectrum, which is like letting anything go. Anything that wants to get built can get built. But there's obviously a middle ground that we want. There's a balance that needs to be struck. And where do we think that balance should be struck, so that as we look at the regulations, we can compare the regulation to where we think that balance should be and see if the regulation is over strict or is it under strict? That's more along the lines of what I was thinking, that what do we believe the purpose of design review, and all of the regulations that don't necessarily have to do with exactly public health and safety. What should the purpose of those regulations be?
I think that even though they're separated here into two distinct sections, we've got our 3 points from the city plan, right? One of which is support the continued vitality and growth of Montpelier's local businesses. And I would say that the design review district and what Mike was saying about economic vitality downtown is, and sometimes there's going to be tension between some of these guiding principles, I think. And yeah, what is the solution to that? That's going to come up in discussion, right? That's just something that we're going to have to hash out when it comes up.
Well, that's the principal aspect of it. It's like, where do you fall along that spectrum? And what is like more?
Well, maybe weighted towards explicitly permissive of housing development.
So, I would point out, for which we've mentioned before, about the design review district. It's certainly not, the rules we have certainly are not out to put everything in resin. We approved.
I was
we
using
approved the
that
transit center.
as an extreme.
Yes.
I wasn't saying that we are the extreme. I'm saying
Yes.
a city could, that's more likely like European cities that have these very historic cities that they want to actually preserve in resin. They don't ever want to see it change. We are not. I wasn't suggesting.
And I was just saying, of our regulations that we have right now, they are trying to strike that balance in the middle of protecting design review without stopping things. So like the transit center, we approved a parking garage and a new hotel with these design review regulations. So there's certainly nothing that's like, oh, these are really hard. You can't, it's like we've approved a parking garage with these. You can do quite a lot with these. But at the same time, it's going to hopefully protect, and that's not to say these are perfect and that they can't be improved, but I think these so far have certainly a lot better than the previous ones that we had in place. And I think they're so far have been striking a pretty good balance of allowing things to happen. Now, I think we've had this conversation. I think the design review district as we have it right now is overly big. And I think we could suck that, because right now, there are a lot of areas that are way out that we regulate everything, the sheds and all the little stuff that I think we could pull those in and really concentrate on the downtown commercial district, and then save that second design review district just for the major site plans or these larger buildings. So I think there's certainly things we could be doing better and make adjustments that would help to, I think about the areas over on Bailey up near in the lower parts of Terrace Street are in the design review district where they would be much more highly regulated.
Yeah, can I interject real quick? I don't want to get too far afield. I'm just cognizant of time. We've got 13 minutes left. And to the extent that we're talking about the words on the page right now. If we want to come to consensus about what we want to adopt in terms of like the words on the page.
In terms of,
I don't want to cut off the discussion. I just
If we're focusing on the principles, then
that's my understanding. That's what's on the table. So
I'm curious what Sean and Maria think about potentially removing the two that I injected into the middle there based off of Sean's email. Wondering if we think that is well captured in the three guiding principles at the top and the priorities at the bottom, or if we need to be a little bit more explicit with that information that I started to pull in.
I mean, I prefer being explicit if we all agree to it.
So can I just say real quickly, I agree conceptually with both of them. But the first one, I would strongly suggest we take out any reference to a case.
Yeah.
You don't need I don't know what that case says. I don't know if it stands for the proposition that's being offered for. So I would suggest and more to the point, I don't think we need it to make it a principle. So it seems to me it would maybe be appropriate, something to the extent of zoning is legitimate use of local government established to, and I think Mike brought up a good point about sort of using a sort of a public good concept as the overriding one that is inclusive of the protection of public health, safety, and welfare. So it might read something like zoning is legitimate use of local government established to further the public good, including the protection of public health, safety, and welfare. I think Mike captures all of those concepts. I mean, certainly without leaning on the reference to a case that I don't know what it says. The second thing I would say in the next sentence, I don't understand what the sentence says.
Yeah.
So
right.
I think I get the concept of it, but the words don't.
Over prescriptive is I shouldn't have written it that way. It would be.
So I just want to make sure I understand what.
Oh, sure.
Concept is that we want to convey. I think I might understand it, but
yeah. So it's the idea of zoning not only being restrictive and prescriptive, but also having language in it that is much more permissive and accommodating.
So
encouraging almost.
You think proscriptive would be the more appropriate word to insert in there?
Right, proscriptive rather than prescriptive.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Why don't we just say Montpelier zoning should be permissive to the greatest extent practicable, or something like that.
Permissive of housing development to the greatest extent practicable.
Okay. I like where you're going with that.
Okay, I'm just trying to.
No,
because I'm trying to make the edits live.
I like that. And I'm not saying I know any better, but I'm trying to capture the.
And I can go backwards. Just that way people can see what's being discussed.
I'd also like to avoid characterizing the current state of the regs one way or the other as being either overly limiting or anything like that.
Sure.
Meredith, can you read that number 2 for me?
Yeah, sorry, that's fuzzy up there.
Oh,
huh?
yeah.
Zoning in Montpelier should be permissive of housing development to the greatest extent practicable, is how I edited it to read. Based on Aaron's statement.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'll have to,
It's
I'll have to
that-
find out who used this room last
I-
and messed with the camera,
Oh,
because don't mess with the camera, people.
I hear ya. The fuzziness factor has been hard to fix. And I've tried zooming in and it doesn't help when we've had to do this before.
It's got to get focused.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't trying to slow us down, but I feel like this is really important. And I think that sentence that we just worked, I mean, I think it's really useful as guidance. And I move again that we adopt this amended version as the guiding principles for the planning department.
Gabe, I completely agree with you. I think this was a good step back to really formulate this, finalize it, and approve it. If I were to make any last changes here, I think that I would maybe pull those two that we were just working on and put them up at the top as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for guiding principles, and we could eliminate any language about the city plan. I don't think it matters where this information came from. That's my 2 cents there.
Okay, so there's a couple things. Gabe has put a motion on the table.
I was gonna say there's a motion on the table.
And then we started
Right.
having a discussion.
Sorry.
let me-
Apologies.
Is there nobody's seconded it yet, so we're not quite there. Does the group want to have any additional discussion about what has been proposed in terms of revisions across the entire document right now before we consider a motion for adoption? Okay,
I mean, I want to see how things shake out.
once you can actually read them. Yeah.
So do you guys want me to try and revise it so it's 5 guiding principles instead of 3 priorities and 2 additional guiding
I think
principles?
that makes.
Okay. Wrong principles. Oh, we already have following guiding principles. I don't need any of that. You can just delete that. It may want to go away. Wait. It's in red line, so it's gonna be funky.
Yeah.
But because your opening paragraph says, as the planning commission begins the next phase of zoning regulation reform, we have identified the following guiding principles to guide our work and support the long-term goals of the city plan. We can say following 5 guiding principles, and then 1, they address our city's urgent need to develop new and affordable housing stock, then go down 2, 3, 4 is the one that previously referenced Euclid v. Ambler Realty Company. And then 5, the modified one about permissive housing development. And then can say, with these principles in mind, the commission will focus on the following objectives as we evaluate potential updates to the zoning regulations. Does anybody want a date reflected in here? Because it's this round of zoning regulations versus futures.
I want everybody in the future beholden.
These principles shall apply in perpetuity. You weren't there when they were formed, so you're.
Anyway, as we evaluate potential updates to the zoning regulations, we can just leave it because it's dated.
Very quickly, Maria, you started the discussion
Right.
about potentially making some changes to indicate, and hopefully I'm phrasing this right, to sort of have use the protection of public health and safety as a clear criteria in which to evaluate all
Right.
changes to the zoning regs. Is there,
Not,
we,
not to evaluate changes to the zoning regs, to
To-
evaluate the zoning regs.
to evaluate the zoning regs, like on a line item basis?
Mhm.
Okay. Is there so I want to wrap that, well, I want to make sure
So should that be in the objectives?
well, I want to talk about what the groups, I don't think we kind of came to a
Yeah.
conclusion. Do folks have any thoughts about making that change? Bearing in mind that we've already made a change to the existing language, I mean, I will just say this is, but I agree with your instinct on that. I think the trouble with it is I think there's a lot of sections within the existing zoning regulations that there will continue to be a lot of sections in the zoning regs that are basically agnostic on the issues of public health and safety. And I think because like Meredith was showing, like, there's all these sort of attenuated links to it, but they're not direct. And I think the other thing in my mind is that assumes that there would be some sort of situation where we might evaluate it in the counter, meaning we would say, well, this zoning regulation is reckless and endangers people, and I don't think we would ever do as a guiding principle. So I just wonder in terms of like, it's difficult. I think it's difficult to apply that principle in every instance because I think in a lot of instances it doesn't necessarily A, apply, or B, make sense. But I guess the question is does the broader language that we were just discussing here not capture what your concern is, and can we make changes to that language to better capture that?
I mean, I would take out the public. I mean, like, that's too vague. Well, your edit, I can't see if it's been edited that way up there.
That's
the public
that's
good
what's
included.
up there right there, because there might be things within the public good that go beyond public health, safety, and welfare
Yeah.
that are allowed regulations, but don't have an explicit tie, like direct tie to health, safety, and welfare. Is my understanding of why Mike
Right.
wanted to
We
put
could-
that in there.
We could certainly go through and do a better job of making sure it's going to add text, it'll add words to the document. But being clear and adding more, which we've done with a lot of purpose statements to certain sections. So as we went through and updated the lighting section and the landscaping standards, we would go through and talk about the purpose. So, we've got standards for making sure that in order to plant certain size trees, you have to have a certain amount of suitable soil. So you can't plant a large tree on a piece of grass that's only this big because there's not enough. It won't survive, won't thrive. So, I mean, that's not public health, safety, and welfare, but it's good landscaping architecture principles to go through and say, if you want to plant a large tree, you have to have suitable soil for it.
I just want to note to everybody, it's 7:30 right now. If folks want to keep going, we can. Otherwise, somebody would need to get out of here. I just want to note that that's what time is. Sorry.
But we talk about a purpose statement. That's why the rule exists. And there's a public good that goes along with it, or talking about how much impervious surface. Maybe we don't talk about it. I don't know if we do or don't. But the reason why we regulate impervious surface and the maximum impervious surface is because we need to treat stormwater. And so the more impervious cover you have, the more we have to address stormwater and stormwater management and what's happening on the rest of those areas. And in certain cases, if you have enough pervious area, you don't have to regulate it at all because it just takes care of itself. And so maybe we don't say that, and maybe we need to say that more as to that's why we have this requirement. So if people want to know why we regulate impervious cover, that's why we regulate impervious cover. And if you want to know why we're regulating the tree size, we could be sure we're being more explicit about why we're doing it, as opposed to, in a lot of our regulations might just be because we told you to. And maybe understanding why we're doing it might help us understand, well, maybe we don't have to do that as much, or maybe we could do it differently or betterly. Now that I understand why we're doing it, I think it'd be better to do it that way. And that can be a conversation. And maybe we could do a better job of putting in these purpose statements as we can, including we've got purpose statements for each one of the zoning districts. Why does this district exist? And we've talked about adjusting it to be more future oriented as opposed to an evaluation of where we currently are. And we recognize that, and we'll work on making those adjustments as we redline. But that's just an idea, one way of trying to help you get to where you're kind of thinking of why is this rule here? And then if there's an evaluation of nobody can justify why it's important or why we're doing it, then maybe that gets to your point of maybe we don't need to.
Right. And I don't think this needs to be public facing. I don't think there needs to be more explication in the zoning regs. I'm just saying, as we review them, this is the principle guiding us. You know, then when we look at a zoning regulation, we go back and say, okay, so how does it affect public health, safety, and welfare? That's all. There's a way to review something. And if we can all agree, and I don't even know if people agree with it, but if everyone kind of agrees to these principles, then when we look through them, we can all remind each other, like, well, this was what we said was going to be a guiding principle. You know, I don't think this is the principles that we need to lay out for public consumption. This is just for our own ability to review and edit.
And I guess my question is as the drafts are currently stands here, there's an inclusion of public health and safety
Right.
as a guiding principle. Is that a?
Yeah, I mean, I think people know what I mean by this one.
Yeah, and that's what I'm just like. Is this okay? Is this okay? Does it adequately encapsulate? Does it adequately capture your concern? Because I feel like the language is here
Okay.
responds to what you just said.
Okay.
Hi, Meredith.
Hi, Meredith.
Maria.
It's not editing on my computer, so I can't see it.
Yeah, because I
You're, like, doing it.
I didn't want to edit the document that you guys had. I pulled
Right.
it down as a Word document. So the first three priorities are written as active statements.
Mhm.
The second, this fourth one about protection of public health, safety, and welfare is much more a passive statement. Right, it says zoning is a legitimate use of local government established to further the public good, including the protection of public health, safety, and welfare. So are you looking for a more active statement, or is the passive statement?
I mean, I think
Do you feel like
could
it
be
works
much
for you?
simpler just saying zoning should protect public health, safety. I mean, I don't think it needs to be. We all know zoning is a legitimate use.
No, and that's
Local government,
why
'cause,
I'm
like,
wondering if that's
this
what
is
the
what-
disconnect is right now.
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, I think
Or-
it could be less wordy.
The zoning shall promote the public good
Right.
through the protection of public health, safety, and welfare.
Yeah.
There you go. I just wrote what
Okay.
you said. Zoning shall promote the public good, including the protection of public health, safety, and welfare. That is what you said, right?
I said should, but not. It's okay. I'm just-
Wait. Oh, zoning should,
Yeah.
not shall. Okay, great.
Okay. Are there any other places in this document where we feel like some additional changes should be made? And I apologize, I'm late to this party because I was not around for the discussions a couple of meetings ago. But I'm wondering, the one sort of additional comment that I had generally for this discussion was I was hoping that we could try to embody the concept of sort of using standards that are quantifiable as opposed to qualified. So where we can, again, have sort of a number attached to things, distances, heights, things that developer can look to and be able to have a checkbox as opposed to, and the reason this was sort of triggered by the character of the area concept that is discussed in, I think, number 3. So I was just going to say that if we can strive to sort of use language that quantifies the standards as opposed to sort of leaves it to some sort of somewhat subjective standard that is a qualified one as opposed to one that can be quantified. And I don't know if there needs to be additional language that capture that concept, but that was my thought. If people agree with that.
I wonder if that would be captured in priority number 1, where we talk about simplifying zoning regulations by expanding opportunities for housing development that can be approved through administrative review. If we explicitly put numbers in there to, I guess I assume that we would have to maybe put some specific.
Using objective standards, maybe.
Yeah. That's not explicitly what you said.
No,
but it might be captured there, but maybe not.
Yeah,
fully.
I feel like the first one speaks to a different issue, but
I think that was what it was trying, like Tim was trying to say that, and what I was trying to put some phrasing terms on with the explicitly permissive.
okay. I mean, I feel like we're all identifying the same issue. We're just saying it in different ways as best we can understand. I get it. It's so I'm okay. We don't need to put it. I mean, I'm not saying we need to put any additional languages, but I feel like we're all on the same page, it sounds like, so we can leave it as is. Given the late hour, one or
Did
two.
you want to go and adopt that?
I was gonna say we can do one or two things. We can either revisit this at the next meeting after having taken a look at the red lines, or we can or I could look for a motion to adopt it now. It's up to the group.
I've moved twice. I may be the only one. I'll let somebody else make a motion and I would second, but if nobody else is on board, then I guess we can wait. I just would love to give these guys clear guidance so that while they're in between other projects, that they feel like they know they're on solid ground.
I agree.
I would move to approve them.
I'll second.
Gabe was going to.
Gabe is
No.
cut out of the loop.
It's okay. It's great.
You see, it's Gabe. All those in favor, and so when you say just adopting it would just be, we would set these as the principles by which we would move forward with the project. Am I right in that? I just want to.
Yep.
Okay. All those in favor of adopting these as revised and amended, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, these have been adopted. Last one is adjournment. I'll look for a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
He's on chair.
I wanted to see that before I forgot.